Good morning, everyone. I hope you slept well, and I hope you're ready for some great stories today on Cozy Horror with me, Dr. Plague. Today, we're going to do some guest narration, Cozy Horror. So, hang out a little bit and hear some other great stories from some great Redditors who write very well. Let's get this started with one of my favorites. It's a newer one by our old friend M. Clark77. It's about a place we've all been to from time to time. A dark place. "Are you really that afraid of the basement?" my boyfriend asked, almost casually, putting on his button-up shirt. I glared back at him. "You're seriously going to bring this up now? I'm getting ready for brunch," I said grumpily, pulling on my bra. He shrugged apologetically. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? I just want to know why. Especially if it's such a big issue. We can talk about it whenever you want, but I'd really like to talk about it eventually." His tone was calm, filled with sincere concern. I sighed. I felt my annoyance slip. I'd been avoiding the subject for so long. I really didn't want to bring it up, but Timothy had been so great. We'd been living together for over a year now, and he'd been very patient with me and my phobia of dark places. I don't just mean I'm afraid of the dark. I mean I go into full-on panic attack mode and start tearing up the walls with my bare hands and fingernails and teeth if I even get closed into a dark place. It makes going out at night or doing anything normal, like going to the cinema or the planetarium or a bar or a club, very difficult. I have a nightlight in every room in my apartment, and so plenty of backups, plus the flashlights, the candles, the lighter, pound of fresh batteries of all sizes. Of course, my smartphone can also function as a flashlight. I could go on, but suffice to say, I'm surrounded by as much light as possible. This was also why we were meeting Tim's parents for brunch in broad daylight, and not for dinner. Never dinner. I didn't leave the house once it got too close to sunset. I mostly drive wherever I need to go. Taking public transport is too risky, and I don't travel very much or very far. I also can't go into a bathroom that has no natural light and nothing but motion sensor-based lights. If they go out for just a few seconds, my heart races, my blood boils from fear, and my lungs burn with panic. I scream and run, crying usually until I'm back in the light. I'm very lucky to have Tim around. Unlike my previous boyfriends, he never made snide remarks about my phobia, even when it disrupts his schedule. His effortless patience was a stark contrast to my previous relationships. I'd never seen him so much as raise his voice. I slowly sat on the edge of the bed. "Okay, I'll tell you why. Right now, actually, if you'd like. I'd rather just spit it out. We have a few minutes, and it's not a very long story anyway." Timothy quickly pulled on his sock and came to sit next to me. I looked at him and then looked back down at the bed. I've never told this to anybody, but the reason I'm so afraid of the dark, of being alone, is because of what happened to me in the basement when I was 10 years old. I paused, and Tim took my hand. His fingers were rough and warm. I'd never had issues with the dark or the basement or anything like that before. One day my mom asked me to go down and fetch the laundry from the dryer. So I've been down in the basement of this house a billion times, and I think nothing of it at all. The door creaks loudly, just like normal, as I open it. I lazily walk down the steps and was busy messing around with my new Walkman when I suddenly heard the door slam shut behind me. I yelled and was plunged into darkness, so pure I thought I'd gone blind. I groped in the dark for the light switch. I heard it click as the light bulb buzzed to life noisily. As I spoke, I could feel my heart begin to accelerate. I could picture that basement now, that bare light bulb. My hand shook. Tim noticed this and began to caress my hands comfortingly. I continued. The basement wasn't that big or fancy. Nothing but bare concrete. We used it to store some old furniture and photo albums. Of course, we kept our laundry down there, too. I was a bit spooked by the door slamming, so I decided to get the chore over with fast. However, as my bare foot left the last step and touched the cold concrete floor, the light bulb glowed. It glowed so brightly that it burst. I screamed from fright, and I was just plunged into darkness again. It was so quiet that the distant sound of my parents or brother now extinguished. All I could hear was my own breathing. I paused again to catch my breath. It's been a long time since I told this story. All the memories that came with it filled me with terror. I moved in the direction of the laundry. I waved my hands in front of my face, but I couldn't see anything. I knew that there was a flashlight in the drawer of the desk next to the dryer. I took a few tentative steps, expecting any minute that I would feel bright pain as it exploded through my hip as I bumped into the desk. I never did, so I started taking bigger steps. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I realized that something was horribly wrong. I should have been on the other side of the room by now. A few steps after that, I should have been on the other side of the wall. Before I knew it, I was running. No, I was sprinting. I was hoping to be lucky enough to slam hard into the wall. It would prove my nightmare was a fake, but the wall never came. I ran through cold darkness. Then I heard a voice. Soft whisper. It was the voice of a man. There's nothing abnormal about his voice at all, but it gave me goosebumps. He warned me. He warned me never to return to the dark. He warned me to never tell anyone. My lips trembled, but I continued, my voice shaky. By then, I was beyond fear and incredulity. How could this be possible? Where was I? I yelped and shielded my eyes because it was suddenly blindingly bright, and I felt really cramped, like the room had just shrunk. Then strong hands were grabbing me and lifting me. I found myself being pulled from the wall. Tim's eyebrows shot up into his hairline at this point, but he remained quiet. We still have no idea how, but some men had heard a noise, and once they'd seen me, they rescued me immediately. They found me in a well that was hundreds of miles from my house, from that damn basement. I paused again, rubbing my temples with the tips of my fingers. I had to go to therapy, and no one could ever explain anything. Like I said before, I never mentioned what really happened to anyone. I didn't know whether I was more afraid of people thinking I was crazy, or if I was really more afraid of that voice. All I said was that I blacked out on my way downstairs. The therapist said I may have gone into a fugue state or something, which basically means that they don't have a goddamn clue what the hell happened to me. I continued to go to therapy for years and years, but it never helped. I felt I could never tell anyone the truth. Anyway, it all ended up in the papers, and my family and I had to move to a whole new town. After that, it was just kind of swept under the rug. People stopped asking questions. My parents never bring it up. They pretend it didn't happen. I like to do that too. So now that I've told you, I don't want to hear another word about it. If you tease me or prank me, so help me God, I'll dump your ass. I was trying to make a joke to help break the tension, but I could feel myself shaking more and more as I recounted the story. It had been some time since I'd thought about that traumatizing day. I felt tears from the corners of my eyes, but quickly blinked them away. Tim sat silently, his expression one of sympathy and concern. Wow, I had no idea. That sounds really horrifying. I completely understand your fear now. feeling a bit less fond of the dark myself. He kissed me lightly on the forehead and rubbed my arm. I looked at him in disbelief. You don't think I'm crazy? You believe me? He smiled warmly. Of course I do. I can totally believe this universe is full of strange, unexplainable, sometimes horrifying things. He paused and looked me in the eye. But are you still okay for brunch with my folks? We can always reschedule, get McDonald's, watch some DuckTales or something. I smiled at him and chuckled. It's tempting, but no, we've booked a table and everything. Besides, it's too short notice now to cancel. Let's get going, okay? I feel okay. It was a long time ago. Tim glanced at me in a way that showed he was wholly unconvinced, but he yielded. All right, my dear. I'll just take the trash down quickly. Meet you downstairs. A few minutes later, I had my makeup on and was waiting downstairs on the ground floor. Tim had left ahead of me to take the trash to the refuse bin in the basement, and I'd expected him to be waiting for me already. But he wasn't there. I frowned, confused. Was he still downstairs? Why was he taking so long? I tried to keep my panic in check, but as the minutes ticked by, my heart began to thump loudly. No. There's no such thing as the dark place. There's no such thing as the monster in the basement. I stammered to myself softly as I tried to force the panic back down into the recesses of my stomach. He's I couldn't end that thought. What if by telling him the truth I put him in danger? The voice had said not to tell anyone. I thought that he would only be angry at me. But now I'm starting to think otherwise. My blood was electrified with terror as I took a small step towards the stairs. The stairway was curved so that the door was hidden. I cranked my neck and peered around the corner. The large metal basement door was shut. Tim? Tim, is everything okay? My voice shook slightly as I spoke, but it was firm and loud. Silence pressed against my ears. I pulled my phone out of my bag. With the tap of a button, a small but bright flashlight switched on and illuminated the hallway. I turned the flashlight towards the stairs. With shaking hands, I took a step forward, started to descend. I halted after 3 steps. I felt dizzy now. Tim, this isn't funny. I'm really freaking... Then I heard him. Kara, I tripped and hit my head. I heard him groan in pain. I think I twisted my ankle. I really need some help. My fear instantly dissipated. Tim was hurt, badly. His voice sounded really worried. If he'd been unconscious this whole time, he'd need serious medical attention. Shit, why had I waited so long to go check on him? Of course, there was no such thing as monsters. I hurried down the basement stairs and grabbed the door handle as I pulled it open. Complete, utter darkness pressed up against my eyes. I felt an unnatural coldness in the air. The basement door swung back and slammed into me so hard I felt myself fly through the air. I hit the ground hard and yelled with pain and surprise. The impact knocked my phone out of my hand, and I heard it smash off as the light went out. What the hell? I stammered, my head swimming with confusion. Timothy, I whispered into the pure darkness. I was sitting on the hard, damp floor, which was the only other thing I could sense, besides the horrendous cold. My soft sobs and the musty smell. Then a gloomy light bloomed to life. My jaw dropped open in horror. It couldn't be possible. There, many yards in front of me, too far to be possible, a single bare light bulb was hanging. Its light was cold and small. It looked almost exactly like the light in my old basement. As I looked down, I yelled and began to wail loudly. Lying in the pool of light beneath the bulb was the mutilated, bloodied corpse of my dear sweet Timothy. The man who I had loved more than anything. The man I'd wanted to marry. The man who always made me feel safe. The man who knew exactly how I liked my coffee and pancakes. His gray eyes were empty as he stared at me. Gone was the perennial warmth and love. His body was covered in deep scratches, and blood soaked his clothes. Oh my God, he was dead. He was dead. Guilt, terror, pain, all kinds of things washed over me. Tears poured down my face, and I yelled incomprehensibly, pleading for someone to help. Without warning, another identical light bulb appeared before the first. My whimpering paused. Then again, and again, my eyes widened with terror. Soon hundreds of lights were blooming into existence, like frigid miniature stars. The line of lights made a beeline towards me, with the final bulb flickering to life above my head. I heard the sizzle and hum of its electromagnetic field. I was frozen with terror. I had no idea what to do. My eyes burned with tears, and I squinted. Suddenly there was a loud pop. A bulb had exploded, and I shouted with fright. I gazed down the line of lights and gasped. At first all I saw were the shards of broken glass and the remnants of the broken bulb above. It had been the bulb right at the far end. My gaze shifted. A humanoid silhouette stood beneath the broken bulb. My heart stopped dead. No, 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 no! I moaned softly, my brain unable to process the terror. Then the next bulb in the line burst, and the man instantaneously stood beneath it, one light closer to me. I screamed with fear and found myself clambering to my feet. I had to get out of here. As I struggled to stand in my panic, I heard another loud pop as the next bulb blew. Then the next one exploded. Suddenly all the bulbs were exploding, one after the other, louder and louder. I saw the silhouette get closer and closer, as swift as a shadow. "No, you stay the hell away from me!" I screamed as bile forced its way into my mouth. My heart screamed from panic. As I turned, I heard a soft, raspy voice say, "We warned you." Tears flooding down my face, I groped wildly for the basement door. I could feel someone standing right behind me. I yelled in delighted surprise as my hands grasped the door handle. I heaved the door open and ran screaming up the stairs. As I got out of the building, I continued to run and scream as I welcomed the feel of warm, sticky summer air on my skin. I'd never been so happy to see the calm blue sky and the vicious midday sun. I ended up being taken to a hospital by a bunch of cops who'd seen me yelling and crying as I ran down the street. My face, my clothes were covered in dirt. My knees and elbows were scratched, but otherwise I was unharmed. I didn't dare tell them the truth. Instead, I said I'd had a panic attack, triggered by going down into the basement to find Timothy. The police searched the whole building, but the only thing they found in the basement that proved Timothy had been there at all was the trash bag he'd taken down. This time, the police have no leads. I miss Tim so much. I feel a numbness where he should be. I keep expecting him to just be around the next corner. His parents refuse to answer my calls. On the other hand, my parents won't stop calling. Suffice to say, I can't even think about the dark without bursting into tears. Even if there's no hope for psychological recovery, I don't think it matters. I still feel like someone's standing behind me constantly. The feeling is especially strong when my back faces a lightless room. I'm never alone now. They're always watching me, waiting for me to return to the dark. I've kept all the lights on constantly. I've not left my apartment in days. No matter how long I wait, though, I can feel them. I'm not even surprised. After all, I had not heeded the darkness's warnings. I get the feeling those who trespass are never forgotten. certainly never forgiven. Moving right along from a dark place to a dark wood, let's hear a story by an old friend of the show, StrangeAccounts, about a forest and a being that you certainly wouldn't want to find yourself around after dark. Let's hear a story about Clickity Clackity. I know it sounds silly, but has anyone ever heard this old poem about the Clickity Clackity? I don't know if it's just something from my small town that they kept alive or what, but I've been trying to do some research about it for the last few weeks. I haven't come up with much, and I'm looking for help. Honestly, at this point, I'm really begging for someone who has some information on this thing to step forward. But this is the poem I'm talking about. In these woods there lives a puppet. It sits and watches all who pass, with eyes of coal and teeth of rust, with skin crackling and full of crust. With wiry limbs, brittle as spent glass, it moves with subtle creaks and cracks. So if you're ever in the woods and see a puppet sitting near, do not look at it, no matter your fear. Just pretend you're okay. That's truly all I can say. In these woods, there lives a puppet. For some context, I live in the southern edge of Wisconsin. My family has always been pretty savvy when it comes to camping, and it was a big thing for my brother Paul and I growing up. We always had fun during family camping trips. But flash forward 20 years, and my parents have since passed on. There was a bad car accident, and the loss hit us unexpectedly. So, as a little remembrance trip, my brother and I had planned a final journey up into the woods that our family had frequented. It's up near the town of Clements, Wisconsin. It's where my family had always camped, but this time we were going in deeper into the woods, just to have a little extra privacy from the normal campground tenants. Plus, we were planning on getting a little drunk, so we didn't want any officers kicking us out. So, we made our plans. We were going to meet at 3 p.m. on Friday afternoon in the parking lot of the Clements Park campground, after which we'd head up north for a couple of hours. We'd found a decent spot in a clearing through Google Map, and we wanted to check it out. After all was said and done, the plan was to head back to our cars on Sunday afternoon. It was just a dumb, drunk, grieving kind of weekend getaway. We both wanted to talk things through, but neither of us could really be described as the going through armchair therapy sort of people. This is just how we handled things. But once Friday came around, things immediately went south. I'd parked my car in the run-down dirt lot of the Clements Park around 2:30. There were a few scattered cars of other campers littered around the dirt field, but nothing really of note. In a way, I'd felt relieved that I wouldn't have to exchange pleasantries with any old family friends. But although I didn't see any familiar people, I did see familiar faces. The trees that had stood tall since I was a kid still remained in their proper places. They held on rebelliously firm to their plots and were left untouched by time. If anything, they had appeared larger to me that day. They had loomed over me with an intensity that I hadn't felt in years. Either they had grown larger, or I had felt much smaller. With a deep breath, I took in the strong, nostalgic smell of the cypress and pine trees that filled the woods. It had always amazed me that the memory could be triggered so heavily with scent. The smell of fresh trees and dirt had taken me back to simpler times of life, when you entrusted your whole being to the care of others, when you were so little that your parents had seemed unstoppable by the forces of nature. You felt carefree because your parents could protect you. You never had to worry about yourself. Now that I was an adult, I knew that whole premise was faulty from the start. When death arrives, it arrives. It doesn't matter how much experience or wisdom you have. It has always, and will always, take what it wants. After a few minutes, I checked my phone and saw 2 unread text messages from Paul. He wrote that he was going to be a few hours late due to work, but told me to just go ahead without him. He said he'd meet me at the clearing sometime in the evening. I remember feeling disappointed in him. I know it wasn't his fault. He had a rough job. But this was supposed to be our time together. Our time to BS and get everything off our chest. I knew that at the end of the day, there was nothing I could do about it. I just thought, whatever, and kept moving about with our plans. I walked behind my rusted little Honda Civic and popped open the trunk. What was inside my beaten-up sedan was worth more to me than my entire life's work. Right in front of me lay the same beaten-up rucksack that my dad had always taken with us. When he passed, my brother and I found all his camping gear still prepped and ready to go in the garage. At that point, we hadn't camped together for at least a decade. As a man, I held back tears as we found it. I think Paul had too. "Hey, Dad," I remembered saying as I picked up the heavy bag. "We're going on another trip together. Paul will be here soon." I looked towards the dirt path leading deeper into the woods and knew it was going to be one hell of a trek forward. It was pretty well known in our town that the trees in Clement's woods weren't exactly easy to travel through. There were thick patches of dry, rotted tree limbs that had entangled and knotted around each other. One bad foot placement, and you'd end up snapping more than just tree limbs. With that in the back of my mind, I started my journey. The first thing you have to pass through is the standard campsites. They were full of beat-up trailers and half-assed tents. We called most of the trailers out there the regulars. They pretty much lived out there during the summer. They were good people, just a little odd. Once you got past most of them, you finally hit the start of Clement's Trail. It's less of a sanctioned path and more of a dusty foot trail. Years of fishermen coming and going had created a thin line of dirt that my family had enjoyed walking through for well over a decade. My brother and I walked down that exact path time and time again with our parents. It was basically a mile loop around a lake that happened to find itself surrounded by jack pines and red cedars that had made up the bulk of Clement's ecosystem. Past that was relatively untouched land. Now, was it legal for us to camp out past the sanctioned areas? Probably not. But what conservation officer would head several hours into the woods on a hunch there might be some buffoons grieving out there? So I pressed forward, continuing northward as I went into the depths of the tree line. Before I knew it, the Clements campground were out of sight and out of mind. During my hike, I used the sun as my marker and kept a good pace. I was actually a little ahead of schedule without having to keep pace with Paul. Incredibly, it was just over an hour of me walking due north that I started noticing something. There was this odd creaking noise coming from the distance just beyond me. It didn't sound like much of anything at first, just kind of like a tree cracking in the breeze. But when it kept happening, always the same distance away and always directly behind me, I started to get an odd feeling creeping up against the back of my mind. Yet every time I turned around to look at whatever was making that noise, I'd see the gentle swaying of green leaves overhead and the sand-colored trunks of the cedar trees, and nothing else. So every time I got that odd feeling running up my spine, I'd turn around and see nothing, then just keep marching on. This happened over and over again. It wasn't until I got to the clearing that something else popped into my head. I hadn't heard a single bird call that entire walk. Aside from the creaking of tree branches and the whistling of the wind, it had been dead quiet. But once again, I pushed it out of my mind. I shifted my focus to setting up the campsite for Paul and I. The clearing we had chosen was perfect. It actually looked better in person than it did on the overhead view from online. It was an almost perfect circle of grass, surrounded by a dense woodline. You could see the sun overhead, casting its dim glow from just over the top of the green canopy. I relaxed my mind a bit, now that I had gotten safely to our makeshift campsite. I went through the mental checklist of everything I had to prepare for the night. I started with the fire. I collected a few big stones that littered the forest floor and formed a little rock pit in the dead center of the clearing. Shortly after that, I made a big pile of dry firewood that I had found scattered around the ground. I did my best to fill the fire pit with the best wood I could find, and tried to spark the tinder with my dad's fire starter. The fire starter went off without a hitch, and it was just in time for the evening sun to start cresting over the horizon. Even though I felt a little rushed setting up the campsite on my own, there was something relaxing about focusing on a single task. I wished Paul was with me, but part of me needed some silence to sort out my own thoughts. The fire provided enough light for me to set up the three-man tent without issue. Before long, I was sitting by the fire, getting ready to open up the cooler and have a drink. That's when I finally got the text from my brother. "Hey, just FYI, I just got here. I'll be there in about 2 hours." I know a lot of you probably think hiking in the woods in the dark is stupid. You're right, we aren't the brightest tools in the shed, but we had an oversized ego for our capabilities. We'd been hiking and camping on our own for so long that it felt like second nature to us. I just texted him back with my thumbs up and fished out a drink. I sat my back against a broken cedar trunk near the fire and looked at my handiwork. "Here's to you, Mom and Dad," I muttered, before having a sip of my drink. Before I knew it, the cans had gathered next to me, and my eyes had gotten heavy. My eyes were half closed when I heard the same clinking noise I'd heard earlier. It was just outside the clearing, in the darkening woodline. My eyes drifted towards the edge of the trees and focused in on something directly across from me. There in the darkness of the sunless forest was a vague shape of something. It was barely noticeable in the shadows. It stood about 4 feet tall, and it was facing me. I slowly leaned myself forward off the tree trunk, my eyes fixated on the small, dark form. I was expecting it to turn and run away from me. It wouldn't have been the first time that I'd been spooked by a deer in the night. I thought to myself that any second now I'd hear the skittering of the deer hooves as they scampered back into the woods. But that's not what happened. As my eyes were focused on the little shape, it started to walk towards me. And by walk, I mean walk. Even with it being cast in shadow, I could tell that it had the frame of a small child. It was deathly thin and gaunt. It moved with a sense of weightlessness to it. The moment that it passed into the camp's clearing, the fire licked its face with light. Even through my drunken eyes, I could see what it was. It was the face of an old wooden marionette. I felt my heart lurch up in my throat. My body had instantly skipped the fight-or-flight response and went straight into freeze. I could no more lift a finger of my hand. All I could do was watch and examine the puppet's features. The wood was old and weathered, cracks and chips layering its pale skin. The eyes themselves were dark and empty, and the mouth was just a gaping hole full of rusted metal false teeth. It had what appeared to be human hair matted over its wooden scalp. It was just staring at me. Time passed, and it just kept staring. I worked up enough courage to slowly slide my hands towards my flashlight. I slowly aimed the bulb towards the thing at the edge of the camp and flipped the switch. Immediately, the puppet shot its hands up in the air and jittered its way towards me. Loud cracking and popping of aged wood filled the campsite. Its feet had glided its way over the forest floor as if it were floating, its knees bounding high up in the air with every mocking step. The clattering sound of wood on wood jangling in the empty void of darkness still haunts me. I dropped my flashlight and fell into the fetal position, completely curling up. My subconscious told me that I was already dead, and my body had totally given up in response. I counted the seconds in my head, waiting for whatever nightmare was about to befall me. But it didn't. I lay on the forest floor in a tight ball for God knows how many minutes. Eventually, I worked up the courage to take a glance at my tormentor. Through my fingers, I peered into my campsite, praying that the thing would be gone. But the puppet was still there. It was now halfway between the fire and me. The wind was blowing against its hardened skin, creaking its body ever so slightly with every gentle gust. Out of its mouth came a light clicking noise, almost like an infestation of woodworms, all calling out. What do I do? I remember repeating in my head, what do I do? Then I remembered the poem from when I was a kid. I remembered what it said. Just pretend you're okay. So I slowly sat up and kept the puppet in my peripheral vision. It turned to face me, but I did my best not to pay attention. You're at camp. Act like you're at camp, I silently recited to myself. I noticed that the fires of the fire pit had begun to dim. I needed to stock the pit again before the light went out completely. I looked over to the large stock of dry wood I'd collected earlier. I thanked God that I'd been smart enough to make a pile before sitting down for the night. The timber couldn't have been more than 10 feet away from me, but when I went to take a step towards the dry wood, my legs nearly gave out from under me. I was shaking bad. I heard the puppet begin to creak its way back up behind me. Maybe it noticed my fear. Maybe it knew I wasn't acting right. My intuition was flaring up in my mind like red-hot coals, that this thing wasn't just something I could run from. I had to play the game. Get the firewood. Don't acknowledge it. Just get the firewood. I straightened myself up and walked as casually as I could over to the bundle of fallen tree branches and limbs. I picked up a large handful and turned around. The marionette was standing just behind me, its coal-black eyes looking at my face. The clicking noise that was escaping its mouth sent a nearly uncontrollable fear through my body. But I pressed on. I walked in a straight line towards the fire pit, narrowly missing the wooden body of the doll. I took a knee to be near the warm flames and dropped the wood down next to me. Handful by handful, I placed the branches in the pit. The creaking of the doll had made its way over to my side as I stoked the flames. I glanced down at my thigh as the doll placed its thin, rotten hand against me. At that moment, I wanted to jump up and run away as far and as fast as I could, but instead I ignored that feeling. I ignored it as the tears welled up in my eyes. I took a stand near the fire and gathered my strength. I closed my eyes and took one last breath of night air before walking over to the tent. As soon as I walked into it, I zipped the door closed behind me. I saw the silhouette of the puppet standing right on the other side of the plastic sheeting, illuminated by the fire behind it. I finally cried. In hushed tones, I cried as long as I could remember. I went to look at my cell phone, let my brother know not to come down there, to tell him to go back to his car and get the conservation officer out here as soon as he could. But when I reached for my pocket, it hit me. I'd left my phone outside near the broken tree stump. I glanced back out at the shadow just outside my tent. It was facing me. It felt like it could see me through the thin layer of fabric that lay between us. I tried to gather up my courage to walk outside my tent and grab the phone, but I couldn't. I just sat there in my tent until I heard footsteps walking up to the campsite. "Hey, Jules, you up?" I stayed silent as Paul called out to me. "Sorry I'm late, but..." "What the hell is that?" he gasped. I heard the panic in Paul's voice. I watched the shadow as the puppet turned to face him. Its arms and legs jerked violently in the air. Paul turned as fast as he could and ran out of the clearing. The puppet followed him with impossible speed. It glided, its dangling, flailing limbs in the air as it began its chase. Not even a minute later, I heard a horrified yelp, then complete silence. I stayed in the tent all night, numb, broken, defeated. I just continually asked myself, why I didn't say anything, why I didn't do anything. By the time morning came, I had left camp, picking up my phone and trying to dial Paul over and over again. There was never an answer. I left everything I brought in that exact spot. I never went back for it. I left those woods in a half daze that I've never recovered from. Before I knew it, I was back in the campground. I contacted the officers in charge of the area, and they conducted a search. They refused to listen to anything I had to say about what I'd seen. But the thing is, they didn't just dismiss it like I was crazy. It was like they'd already known what had happened and had refused to acknowledge it. We never found my brother. I could never take another walk in those woods either. I left the searching up to the police and the local volunteers. But what I can do is ask a question. Does anyone know anything about the old Clickity Clackity story? Boy, oh boy, we're just going on a tour of dark places today, aren't we? From dark places to the dark woods to the dark and unfriendly streets. Let's hear a story from our friend Carbodex about how the children are disappearing on the street. The hissing of steam from the subway grates interrupted the silence of the evening. City lights cast long, menacing shadows over the pavement. Right in front of me, a missing child poster flapped in the breeze. It had been plastered over a lamp-post, rain-washed, and barely clinging to it. I had seen that face before. Street vendors sold questionable food, with grease pooling in the grill tops. A thin wisp of smoke emanated from the cart, blending with the city fog. At that hour, only the brave or the foolish roamed the streets. "I told you," a voice sneered, breaking me out of my reverie. I turned to see Marco, an old friend from high school. "Children go missing here every damn week." "And?" I glared. "And nothing," he laughed, taking a drag from his cigarette, the orange glow illuminating his face in a sinister dance. "Just stating the facts." I'd come back to the city after years abroad. Upon my return, the rumors had started. Whispers about children who'd vanished into thin air, never to return. The rumors were suffocating, and their impact on the community was palpable. "Third kid this month," a woman murmured to her friend as they hurried past, clutching their bags tighter, casting suspicious shadows at anyone who dared to make eye contact. "I heard it's a man," said a homeless guy, propped up against a brick wall, a tattered hat placed in front of him with meager coins. "Tall, wears a hat, stalks him, he does." Marco scoffed, exhaling a plume of smoke. "Urban legend. Every city's got one." "Then explain the disappearances," I retorted. He shrugged. "Maybe they ran away. Maybe it's a trafficking ring. Who knows? It's the city. Things happen." My fingers itched to slap the indifference from his face, but the seed of fear had been planted. I started seeing the missing children posters everywhere. Lamp posts, bus stops, the mouths of alleyways. One evening, while walking through the park, I saw a group of kids playing. The setting sun cast a golden hue over their innocent faces, their laughter echoing, forming a dark contrast to the tales of horror that loomed large. In the distance, a silhouette stood watching, a man in a hat. I squinted, trying to get a better look, but the figure melted away, almost as if he had never been there at all. The fear grew. Every time I'd heard a child's laughter, my heart would race. Every shadow, every whisper, every creak became a harbinger of doom. The nights were sleepless, the weight of a dark city, secrets that pressed down on me from everywhere. One night I was taking a shortcut through an alley, the familiar sound of children's laughter sending shivers down my spine. I strained my ears, trying to locate the source. It seemed to be coming from an old, dilapidated building, its windows boarded up, a relic from the long ago past. Against my better judgment, I approached, feeling an inexorable pull. As I neared the entrance, the laughter grew louder, more distinct, but eerily off somehow. It sounded distorted. The front door creaked open, revealing a dark hallway. From within, the giggles continued. My feet moved of their own accord, leading me deeper into that abyss. Each step echoed a rhythmic beat that only seemed to amplify the terror coursing through me. A dim light at the end of the hallway beckoned. The room it led to was bathed in an otherworldly glow. At the center stood a massive mirror, its ornate frame decorated with grotesque faces. The reflection, however, was not my own. Instead, the faces of the missing children stared back, their eyes hollow, their smiles twisted in eternal torment. "Help us," they whispered in unison. From the shadows, a tall figure emerged, the brim of his hat casting a shadow over his face. "Another one for my collection," he mused, his voice dripping with malevolence. I tried to move, tried to scream, to do anything, but my feet were rooted to the spot, paralyzed by an unseen force. As the figure approached, the room grew colder, the children's faces in the mirror growing more desperate. The man's hands reached out, inches from my face, and suddenly a blinding light filled the room, a cacophony of sound, sirens, shouts, the distant wails of a child. The spell was broken. I turned and ran, and never looked back. But the nightmare was far from over. I burst into the open night, gulping in the chill air, the neon city lights blurry through my tears. The horrifying vision in the building was imprinted on my mind. Those children, their faces warped with terror, the tall man reaching out for me. The sirens grew louder, reverberating through the empty streets, only to drown out when I stumbled into Marco, a concerned expression replacing his usual indifference. "What happened?" he panted, grabbing my shoulder. "I followed you when I saw you enter that building." But I could only point back to the cursed structure, my voice a mere whisper. "He's in there." Marco's eyes darted to the building, then back to me. Without a word, he pulled me away, ushering me towards the brighter parts of the city, away from the echoing laughter and the haunting shadows. We found ourselves in a 24-hour diner, the sterile fluorescent light seeming alien after the night's events. I narrated everything, and Marco listened intently, occasionally sipping his coffee. "You're lucky to have gotten away," he muttered, tapping his fingers nervously on the counter. "There are legends, you know, of the man in the hat. They say he traps souls, feeds on the innocent." "But why children?" My voice wavered, and the passing waitress shot me a worried glance. Marco sighed. "Children are pure, their energy's untainted. And urban areas, they're hunting grounds, filled with distractions, making them easy to prey on." Dawn approached as we decided to notify the police. Their skepticism was palpable, yet the consistent disappearances provided some weight to our story. They agreed to inspect the building. What they found sent shivers down my spine, and even the most seasoned officer was rattled a little. Inside that room was the mirror, the atmosphere thick, stifling. The walls were lined with old photographs, each displaying a missing child, their eyes vacant. In the center stood the grand mirror, but it was ordinary now, reflecting nothing but the grim faces of the officers. However, the most disturbing discovery was a room concealed behind thick drapes. Inside, a maze of strings connected pinned pictures, notes, bizarre symbols, each thread intertwined, leading to a single image in the center, a sketch of a man in a hat. Below it, a chilling note: "The city feeds, and so shall I." News spread like wildfire. The city was in an uproar. Vigilante groups formed. vowing to hunt down the man in the hat. Parents held their kids close, and the night saw the streets deserted. Weeks turned into months, but the city's palpable fear remained. The disappearances halted, but the memories persisted, a shadow over every home. One evening, as rain lashed the window panes, I received a call, an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A raspy voice, dripping with malice, whispered, "You escaped me once, but the city never forgets." Frozen, I could only listen as soft, distorted laughter echoed in the background. I slammed the phone down, my heart pounding. The man in the hat wasn't done. The city's nightmare had only just begun. Despite the overwhelming dread, there was a determination that burned within me. I couldn't let this malevolent entity continue his reign of terror. Teaming up with Marco and a group of other survivors, we decided to delve deeper, to unearth the truth behind this urban legend. Our research led us to an ancient myth, stories of an entity that existed in the shadows, thriving on fear. The more that we feared, the stronger they became. Legends spoke of mirrors as portals, realms where these beings would trap souls, feasting on their essence. We needed to destroy the source of the power. We needed to destroy the accursed mirrors. Armed with tools and determination, we made our way to the building. The entrance seemed more foreboding than before, its dark void beckoning us, challenging us. Inside, the silence was oppressive. The mirror room awaited, the large glass surface reflecting our anxious faces. Taking a deep breath, I swung my sledgehammer. The impact sent ripples across the city. Every street, every home, every heart felt that first strike. As cracks appeared, the trapped souls began to break free. The city, once cloaked in darkness, began to breathe again. But it wasn't over yet. From the mirror's depths, the man in the hat emerged, his form more terrifying than any legend could convey. Our final battle had begun. The room's temperature plummeted. Our breaths were visible, forming vaporous clouds in the freezing air. The man in the hat moved with unnatural speed, a mere blur as he lunged at us. Marco and the others tried to restrain him, but it was like fighting a hurricane. His sheer force was overwhelming. His eyes were pools of infinite darkness locked onto mine, and I felt a pull, an overwhelming desire to succumb. Those eyes were a promise of peace, an end to constant dread, but beneath that, a current of benevolence lurked. "Join the others," he hissed, his voice echoing with the pain and sorrow of all his victims. But I wasn't ready to give up. Remembering the research, I shouted, "Don't look into his eyes. He draws strength from our fear." Distracting him with makeshift weapons and tools, we circled the mirror, chanting an ancient spell we had discovered during our research. The room quaked. The very foundations of the building groaned under the force. The mirror's cracks began to grow, each fracture emitting a piercing scream, the collective voice of the trapped souls demanding release. The man in the hat, his strength waning, tried to retreat into the mirror, to escape the onslaught, but our chants grew louder, drowning out his anguished cries. With one final surge of energy, the mirror shattered, sending shards flying in all directions. The room was engulfed in blinding light, a force so potent it threw us back. As the light dimmed, we slowly got to our feet, taking in the aftermath. The man in the hat was gone. In his place was a pile of ashes and a worn-out hat lying on the floor, marking the end of that ancient terror. The walls, once lined with haunting photographs, now displayed blank frames, their tormented occupants finally free. Exhausted, we made our way out, the first rays of dawn painting the city in hues of hope. The streets, for the first time in months, echoed with genuine, joyful laughter. Children played without fear, families reunited. The weight of the dark past slowly faded away. News of our victory turned us into local heroes, but we knew the truth. The city's true heroes were its inhabitants, their collective spirit and hope being the real force that banished the evil. Yet, the city bore the scars, reminders of its tormented past. The once abandoned buildings became a memorial dedicated to the lost souls, ensuring the city would never forget. Years went by, life moved on, but every now and again on quiet nights, when the city heartbeat slows, whispers rise of a time when shadows held power, of brave souls who fought back, and of a man in a hat whose reign of terror is no more. However, urban legends have a way of persisting, tales passed down from generation to generation, and while the city had fought off one darkness, who's to say what other horrors lurked in its depths, just waiting for their time to rise. Yet again, I promise, there's no theming in this story. However, it appears that we're transitioning into a dark and troubled arcade. Starting life as a two-parter, I bring you a tale by the NineTailedTanuki, entitled, I Worked at a Small Town Arcade with Strange Rules. This all happened before COVID-19. I think it was 2016, maybe. Started working at the arcade some years before it all happened. I had a run-in with the manager and all that. When I got hired, however, the manager made us all, the new employees of the arcade, memorize some specific rules. These were unusual, since we were working in an arcade with things like Pac-Man and Frogger and Donkey Kong, but you get the idea. Rule 1. If a new arcade game shows up either by the name of No Heart, No Soul, or with an EXE at the end of the title, do not play it, or ever let a patron play it, at any cost. This was the one rule that I almost broke. When I had to memorize the rules, my first thought was, that's the most ridiculous set of rules I've ever seen. After what has gone on, how could I not think they were serious? Originally, rule number 1 just had with EXE on the end of the title, but the part about No Heart, No Soul was added after the death of a 10-year-old non-binary kid named Gabrielle Myers and a 14-year-old girl named Natalie Schmaltz. It happened as a result of playing the game. According to the account of the manager, a former employee named Thomas Ferrari allowed the games to be played. The kids played the game, it displayed a creepy message, and it added a creepy character with the player's name, which was uncanny to say the least, since the arcade game shouldn't even have the player's name already if it isn't entered. Both kids had talked to a character in-game that looks like a mixture between a female pirate and a biker punk. They then had to complete a strange, difficult challenge. They couldn't complete them, resulting in the screen showing a message saying, "Game over, may the next victim play." Both of them went pale and catatonic after that, as if the game had stolen their souls. Another former employee named Marky Harrison recounted that the game had shown up in another arcade under a different name. Now I'm going to tell you about when I almost broke the rules. No, this did not involve No Heart, No Soul. The arcade had just opened for business, with Galaga, Mrs. Pac-Man, a vehicle arcade, a Batman, a dance machine, you name it. I was cleaning up before work when I noticed a new arcade game had been plugged in. It was Donkey Kong EXE. I at first shrugged it off, thinking it was a bootleg Donkey Kong arcade. But the rules, I snapped out of it and realized the rules applied here. I remembered Rule 1 and remembered thinking it was ridiculous. I went and let the arcade open, ready for patrons to play. But the kids immediately noticed the new Donkey Kong game, and they all gathered around it out of sheer interest, almost as if they had become zealots of a deity of sorts. Mr. Crab, one of the kids asked, "Can I play this?" They were pointing at the Donkey Kong EXE. I was about to let her play it when the manager showed up out of nowhere. He came to me so fast I swear he didn't even touch the ground. "Rule 1, Danforth." But I can't disappoint these kids," I said, as if I'd allowed this monster to do its thing. "Whatever you do, do not, under any circumstances, let anyone play this game. That includes you. It has not succeeded in finding another victim in 6 months, and I will not let it happen again." Later, after the arcade closed, the game was unplugged, hauled off, and taken away. No child played that game that day. Rule 2. If no person comes out of the laser tag arena for 30 minutes after they enter, notify the management immediately. After my run-in with the manager after nearly letting the girl play the game, how could I not follow the rules? This happened about a month after the Donkey Kong EXE incident. As a general rule, we have to observe the time of the next group of people to play laser tag. We also have employees keeping watch on the laser tag in case Rule 2. Normally a period of laser tag lasts 20 minutes, so we're usually good at that. I had the shift that day. I watched the people go in, so I wrote down the time they went in. I know, we get bored with all these kinds of things, but how can we not get bored when we just have to watch the entrance of a laser tag arena? The time was 2:37 p.m. when the group went in. I watched the entrance, glancing at my watch to make sure the laser tag game lasted 20 minutes and no longer. My coworker Miles ghosted up to me, as she always did. "Danforth, how you doing?" "Miles, don't you dare sneak up on me like that. I need to make sure this laser tag game goes smoothly." "Oh, that's what you have to do today." "Okay." She went back to her janitorial duties, and by then I glanced at my watch. 3:05. I dashed straight for the manager's office, after having noticed that nobody had come out of the laser tag arena. After my run-in with rule number 1, how could I not? I burst through the door, and I said in a volume that was almost like shouting, "Rule 2, time was 2:37 p.m., 12 people inside." The manager got out of his chair so fast that I thought he was about to run for his life. "Ah, crap! Move aside! I knew this was going to happen again. I knew it! He grabbed a screwdriver and a wrench from his desk drawer and rushed towards the laser tag arena. He opened the circuit breaker inside and did some things that would require the skill of a mechanic. About 5 minutes later, I saw the people I had seen enter come out the exit. All 12, no worse the wear. Later that day, I asked the manager about what happened, which prompted him to make this rule. It turned out that some residents of the small town had gone missing after something had happened in the laser tag arena. He showed me the missing posters, even showed me some of the paperwork with notes from previous employees, about the time they had gone in, and how 30 minutes had passed with no one coming out. I realized that what he had done was a type of procedure that stopped the monster within the laser tag game. He discovered it in some kind of manual. I realized from his reaction to my notifying him of rule number 2 that the rules weren't out of silliness. They were there to protect us. Rule number 3, if a blonde woman in a red dress asks for a prize, under no circumstances should you give any of them to her. This happened to me for the first time about a month into my job. I was given the shift of the prize counter that day. Note to you guys, we change jobs weekly to make sure everyone doesn't get burned out, and, to protect us from the weirdness that goes on around here. Like I said, I was working the prize counter. There were some interesting things, like the toy balls and the Nerf guns that you couldn't find anywhere else, but they were mostly all plush animals. Luckily, the woman in the red dress can take no for an answer, making her one of the least dangerous things on the job in the arcade. I got about 7 tickets from this kid, and he asked me for that unicorn. I gave him the one he wanted, but in the line was the blonde woman in the red dress, just behind the kid who wanted the unicorn. She looked like her hair was really bleached white. Her dress was like a red-colored version of a Monica Black dress in the TV show. Her figure was awfully attractive and a little creepy. She came up to me and asked, "May I have one of those plastic pirate swords?" She offered me the 5 tickets that it would take to get it, and I offered it to her, but the thing I found out about the ticket was that there were no numbers on them like there normally would be. So I said no, and she just smiled and walked out of the arcade. I went to the manager to find out more about this rule. "Hey, can I talk to you for a second? Danforth, you going to tell me you broke a rule?" "No, I need to know more about rule number 3. With that, he gave me a stack of papers. When the arcade closed that night, I read through most of them, the headlines jumping off the page at me. Family murdered in their home, an article from a 1985 paper. The article talked about an employee of the arcade offering a woman in a red dress a prize the night before they were killed. That night, he and his whole family had been murdered. Engaged couple killed. That had been an article from 1987. The wife was working at the arcade when she offered a prize to a woman in a red dress, right before the night they were murdered. I could see some handwriting, but it was hard to read. "It's the same lady," someone had scrawled in the margins. Several other articles read about someone offering a prize to a blonde lady in a red dress, right before their death or the deaths of their families. When I got to the last page, it was just more handwriting. I better make a rule to avoid this in the future. Rule 4. If there is ever a power outage in the after hours, hold still. If an arcade turns on by itself during the said outage, go straight to it and play the game until the power comes back on. Make sure that when you play the game under that circumstance, to make no mistakes whatsoever. Normally, we're not supposed to play games on the job, but if the circumstance for this rule happens, that is where you can get an exception. Since we switch jobs weekly, I sometimes have janitorial duties after hours. 2 weeks into the job, I had janitor duty in the after hours, and the power went out. That includes the obligatory emergency lights that are supposed to stay on regardless. I stood completely still, thinking the power outage would be temporary, but an arcade cabinet came on, turned on by itself with a startup screen, and the number of credits needed to play already in it. It was that game with the hamster wheel, the one that kids love so much. You have to roll the ball through the course without fail, and at the end you get some tickets. Remembering the rule, I walked right up to it and started playing. It didn't play like it usually did, and it was as if the difficulty had been turned way up. It was hard not to let the wheel fall off. I kept on playing, just trying to keep him from falling off the track. I sat there playing that game for 4 hours until the power came back on, and when it did, I went straight to management. I saw you playing that game. Rule 4, Rule 9, or were you just slacking off? Rule 4, boss. Good. Keep in mind, Danforth, if Rule 4 should happen again, making any mistake will do to you what happened to Gabrielle and Natalie. I remembered those 2 girls laying pale and catatonic in front of that machine, and made a mental note never to fail at a game if it happened again. Rule number 5, if all the arcade screens show the exact same message, notify the management immediately. I had janitorial duty, but sometimes I work the prize counter, and sometimes I also work the laser tag to make sure that it works properly. I had janitorial duties that night, but sometimes I had to work the prize counter, and sometimes I also had to watch over the laser tag to make sure that rule number 2 never went down. I'd been working for 3 months when the arcade games suddenly blinked on after hours, and all the games had the same screen. They all showed the exact same image, the image that was a mixture of biker chick and Disney princess of some form. I remember cleaning up the last of the mess I was on super quick and going straight to the manager. Rule 5. Okay, Danforth, stay here. I'll take care of it. He rushed straight to the arcade game with the biggest screen, which was in the corner. He stood straight-faced in front of the screen and asked whatever the girl was on the screen, "All right, what do you want this time?" The image on all the screens turned to look at him, and they spoke like multiple girls talking to him at once. "You know what I want." "Cut the crap, lady. Tell me what you want." "You made the rules against it, remember? You know the games are hungry. Not after those 2 girls. Never again. Rules are meant to be broken, Lester. You know what I want. Like I'd ever believe anything you say again. You think you can just make rules against the creature I am? When I need more what? You know what I want. No way I'm letting you kill more kids. Don't you remember? I want someone to play no heart, no soul. The hell with that. Please. Why won't you let this cute little man play it, too? No chance. You'll pay for this. Rule number 1's there for a reason. There was silence for a moment. Then she said, "You've given me what I want. All I really wanted was for you to remember the fear you had when I took those souls." "You bitch," the manager said. Then the arcade screens turned off. No other incident happened that day. I remember being pretty scared. Seems as if the arcades are possessed by some strange monsters. It felt as if we were dealing with some sort of demon. All I could do was watch helplessly, really having no way to deal with any of this. Rule 6. Should any patron hear a strange growling noise from any arcade cabinet, let them know immediately that you'll take care of it, and get a kit from underneath the manager's desk and place it behind the game in question. This incident I'll tell you about happened nearly 5 months into the job. It happened about 5 or 6 times a month. Some kid was complaining about hearing a low growling from the Frogger machine. There are kits for each arcade underneath the manager's desk, supposedly containing different foods for different monsters inside the cabinets. They said that they heard the growling after they completed about 5 levels, and it distracted them so much that they ended up failing into a game over. "Don't worry, kid. I'll take care of the problem." I rushed to the manager's office and asked if I could get something from beneath his desk. "Rule 6, Danforth?" he asked. "Yes, Rule 6. "Which arcade?" "Frogger." "Hang on." I waited for about half an hour outside the manager's office. I was bored, so I was about to leave when he came out with the necessary kit. "Here, remember to place it directly under the arcade cabinet." I rushed over to the Frogger cabinet and quickly put the kit underneath the cabinet. Almost immediately, I thought I saw tentacles just kind of take the kit. I'll admit, it scared me so bad that I jumped, and one of the kids asked if I was okay. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for your concern. Rule 7. If a strange woman's face suddenly shows up at the game where you throw balls at the bottles, close it off until the face is gone. I had the drive to follow this rule after I saw what happened when a patron actually played it when the face was present. The face looked a lot like Olivia Newton-John's from that movie Grease. My getting distracted caused what happened next. I saw the guy start to play. He threw 2 balls without incident. The face showed up right after he threw the third one to topple the third set of plastic bottles. The ball hit the face, and if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I'd have never believed it. The face showed a lot of anger. It stuck its tongue out, then opened its mouth wide. The man could hardly believe his eyes. He looked scared. Luckily, no one else was near the game, which was good because no one else had to watch that face slide up out of the game and eat the man whole. I stood there in shock for a minute. I noted the identity of the patron and closed off the game. We do this by adding a sign and some yellow tape that says it's under repair. Then I went to the manager immediately. I told him everything. Danforth, that face tends to show up when you least expect it. It's very rare that the face would show up right as the game is being played. You were supposed to tell him to wait between throws in case the face showed up. I blinked. I did. He even complied. Okay. That face showed up just as he threw the ball. Meaning that either the timing was bad, or that thing's getting smarter. I'll look into the incident. For now, close the game off for the rest of the day. And that was just what I did. The face usually goes away after an hour of the game being closed, but it takes a little longer if it gets someone. Could be why he wanted me to close it off for the rest of the day, I guess. Rule number 8. If a brunette shows up in a black dress with a facial tattoo of a spider web and walks through as if she's floating, notify the manager immediately. This one happened about 6 months into the job. I was making my rounds after hours, making sure to keep following the rules. The patrons were just leaving when I saw the brunette walk in. It took me a while to notice her face. Yeah, she was wearing a black dress. She did walk like she was floating. She was super tall, as though she might be over 8 feet. I was about to dismiss her as a patron coming for a prize when I noticed the unmistakable tattoo of a spider web around her right eye. After 6 months of noticing what happened when you break the rules, how could I not rush to the manager's office on instinct? Boss, we got a Rule 8. I see. Bring her to me, Danforth. This might take a while, so just wait outside till I'm done. I had a strong feeling that he might have met her before. I looked all over for this girl. Yeah, she was beautiful. Yeah, she was tall, but for some reason she kind of blended in. I finally found her by the Pac-Man machine, and I took her straight to the manager's office. When I asked her to come with me, though, she turned around, and she looked scared to death. I told her it was okay, and I brought her to the manager's office. The door closed as she went inside, and I just waited there until he was done. He was right, it certainly took a while. Boredom started setting in, and the arcade machines turning on and off was getting annoying. After a while, the brunette walked out, seemingly calm, and left the arcade. The manager's eyes appeared bloodshot, and I asked him what had been going on. Can't tell you, but were the arcade screens acting strange? They were turning on and off over and over. He paused for a moment. He looked at the arcade screens and saw they were still doing it. Danforth? Yeah, boss. It's time. We have to break Rule 9 tomorrow. Rule 9. Do not play the nameless arcade game that randomly shows up in every corner of the arcade. The cabinet in question has no name at all. Almost every day, it just randomly shows up in another corner. The arcade screens have different ways of acting if the brunette shows up, he told me. If they were showing weird images and cycling, it meant that there was nothing wrong. If they were showing the image of that girl while the brunette was there, then he had to let her talk to the brunette. But if they were flashing like that, like they had the day before, then we'd have to break Rule 9. The next day, the nameless arcade machine showed up near the entrance. It was almost like muscle memory for me to try to put the out of order sign on it, but the manager just waved me off. I need to do this, to keep the business going and to protect everyone. I was looking over his shoulder, studying the game that I had so often ignored. A new name, Lester Harrison, showed up in the left corner, a name that turned out to be the manager's, though I didn't know it at the time. The name of the game was No Heart, No Soul, just as it had been for the other kids who had died playing it. I heard that in this nameless arcade game, the avatar was consistent, unlike the Rule 1 cabinet. In it, the avatar looked like a rich man with a disfigured face. My boss got the man to the right of the arcade game, and the man talked to what appeared to be a zombified blend of a biker punk chick and the disguise that the two FBI characters wore in White Chicks. They seemed to talk in an unintelligible language, a mix of Spanish and Irish, I think. Then the screen changed to black, with the white text that said, "Please choose a new manager." Then the manager said, "I already did. He's my best employee, and I think he's fit for the job." Then the text changed again. "Danforth Crab? Indeed, he is eligible." Then the game changed. It changed into the ones described in Rule 1. It changed into one of those EXE ones that we weren't supposed to play, the ones that had led to the death of those two kids. In this case, it was the avatar in a burning version of Green Hill Zone of Sonic the Hedgehog. Then the manager went catatonic, his skin paler than I'd ever seen it. I decided to move his body off, and then the text read, "Now that you have taken the managerial duties of this place, please move the character to the goal. He would have wanted you to manage the arcade and protect everyone." When I did as it asked, I noticed the name on the corner changed into mine. So I played it to bring the avatar to the goal. I was scared, even when I managed to get it playing. Scared because the manager died right then and there, before the game had ever even been completed. I was mentally scarred by the experience of following and seeing the effects of breaking each rule, but I had to do it. It took a while, but when I finally got him to the goal, I was relieved. Then the game's text switched again. "You've passed the test. I assure you that you will do what you can to save us all. Remember to read the manuals on the desk so that you can fulfill your job. Goodbye." Then the arcade turned itself off. I went to Lester Harrison's office, now my office, I suppose, and looked into the manuals. I was scared because I'd never taken such a job before. Also, having witnessed his death, a death that was shared by Gabriel and Natalie, had scared me. The manual was leather-bound, had the rules, the reasons why, and instructions on how employees must be trained. On the last page it said, "Rule 10, the establishment must always have a manager and an owner." And now, let's finish up strong with what else but a dark and foreboding mountain. Let's hear a story from a very good friend of the show, CIAHerpes. Wherever he is, I hope he's doing well, because I can't seem to find him anywhere these days. Let's hear a story about a boy who saw demons circling an old man in his youth. The old monk looked up, shielding his eyes from the sun with his hands. The clouds looked strange, black, thick, curling like smoke above where he now sat on top of the mountain. "So it has started," he said. I heard him from farther down the trail, carrying a pail of water for us to drink. Back then, as a 7-year-old boy, I lived in the nearby village. I always wished to learn from the monk. They know secrets, after all. "Oh, Father," I said, dropping the heavy pails of water on top of the mountain, where the monk sat in his ochre robes, his legs crossed full lotus in the eternal symbol of meditation. "What are those clouds, do you think?" He didn't look up at me, but for a moment I thought he might not respond. "Boy, there are things in this world you don't know yet. The wonders of enlightenment, yes, but also the strange evil demons who rule the sky and torture the evildoers in Naraka. They see I am weak, and that I have not yet attained enlightenment. They come here to torment me, to see that I am reborn," the monk said, his voice wavering and cracking as he came to the last word. "They know I have failed. I have not attained nirvana." The old monk did look weak. His hands trembled, and his legs under his robes looked like thin, brittle sticks. His eyes watered constantly, drooping, the whites looking more like yellow jelly than sclera. But in the center of those eyes, I saw a blazing determination and a deep energy. "All beings know the horror of rebirth. Is that not true, old father?" I asked, sitting down beside him. He shook his head. "I will not," he said bluntly, his voice gaining strength and volume. "I will not be reborn. This cycle must end. This is my last body. I swear it on the sky, on the trees, on the mountain that we sit upon. The demon will not win." The old monk had gone to a doctor. The doctor had looked at him, his sickly and jaundiced appearance, and had immediately begun running tests. "You have terminal liver cancer," the doctor said. "I'm sorry, but you will not live out the month. It has progressed too far." "So it has. So it has. All things must arise and pass away." "I can write you a prescription for," the doctor began, but the monk waved him off. "No medicine. Thank you for telling me this great secret, doctor. The secret of my death. Now I have time." After speaking these cryptic words, he got up and calmly walked out of the office, heading towards the deep forest and high mountains of his country from which he knew he would never return. The monk had told me this as we walked up the mountain to the final place of meditation. I'd cried, tears streaming down my cheeks. But who will teach the townspeople? Who will perform acts of compassion and spread wisdom when you are gone? We have no one else, old father. You're the last." The monk walked in silence for a moment, thinking deeply under the bright light of the sun. "You will, perhaps. We have always passed on wisdom from big hand to small, from old to young. Someone will come, I believe. People who want to obtain the highest wisdom are rare, yet they exist, even in a world so far gone." Strange sounds came from the sides of the trail. It didn't sound like animals, but rather like high-pitched screaming and laughter. I could catch glimpses of black, hateful eyes in the brush, but when I turned to look, they had already gone. "Do you see?" I whispered. The monk nodded slowly, not a trace of fear in his voice. "They are not here for you. They are here for me." "But why?" "They're demons, my son. Their joy comes from death, from pain and loss. And the greatest loss is the loss of enlightenment, of wisdom, of peace. They know this. Their instincts tell them, just like the cheetah knows which of the antelope is slow and hurt before the hunt even begins. They will not trouble you, but if you wish to turn and go, I will not hold it against you. This is my journey, not yours." "I will stay by your side until the end," I said, smiling up at him. He looked sad, but he still stood up straight and proud. Occasionally he would grab at his stomach and bend over, moaning. He would take a few deep breaths, and sweating and wavering slightly, he would return to the trail. But as I looked forward to where the trail ended, my breath caught in my throat. The sky had turned black over the peaks of the mountain. In the blackness, I thought I saw glimpses of eyes and a smile. Will they kill you, old father?" I asked it in my most trembling voice. He walked on in silence for a long time, without answering. We made the top of the mountain. I had never been so high before, and the beauty of the view took my breath away for a moment. I stood there, staring out for hundreds of miles, seeing the rolling hills turned into flat plains and oceans. Towns shone on the land below us, looking dark and tiny, the people like ants. But the blackness of the clouds and the strange demonic noises from the forest ruined much of the beauty for me. Without ceremony, the monk put down his meditation pillow in the middle of a patch of soft grass. He looked down at it, then he looked over at me. "I will not be rising again. You must return home alone after the end." "I will. You've shown me fearlessness. I will be like you. I'm not afraid of death or demons, just like you. I can get home by myself." "Your parents will worry," the monk said, but I shook my head. "This is more important. I'll stay by your side until the end. You will not be alone." "I'm never alone. I walk the path of the Buddha. He is here, by my side, on the trail and above, selfless and free as the wind. I'll follow him out at the end, I hope. We will go together without self." I didn't understand what he said, but I smiled all the same. "Now I must sit and meditate. Time is short. Do what you will, my son. You were always a good boy, standing by my side, by the side of a man who is dying." The lightning and hail began within minutes of him sitting down to meditate. I tried to take refuge under the great canopies of the tree, but the monk got pelted with hail, great balls of ice that smashed and cracked against the ground. I saw some hit him on the head, causing streams of blood to run down his face and soak into his robes. Yet he never reacted, but breathed slowly in and slowly out, concentrating his mind on the final goal. As the storm worsened, lightning began to strike the top of the mountain. The blasts felt like bombs, and the trees split apart under the force of the explosion. But the monk did not react. I moved further into the woods, but not so far that I couldn't see the monk. I stood there, huddled and shaking, wondering why I'd come so far, and yet when I looked at the clear, calm face of the monk, my doubt disappeared. "He's alone, dummy," I chided myself when the terror grew too great. "Would you leave him to die? Stay with him until the end. Let him know that at least one person cares for his life." But the storm didn't end. It grew more intense, and from the darkness of the sky above, I saw many eyes looking down on the monk. They looked upon him with hatred and hunger, as if they wished to eat him alive. From the forest below I heard many footsteps. There was great laughter, demonic and low. From the trees I saw abominations emerge. On the trail and the paths they walked. I'd gone to the edge of the forest, but I could look down the mountain and still see the old monk. They looked mutated and sick, the demons below. Their skin had great gouges, blisters and cuts, maggots and pus pouring out from each wound. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4, and they bit and clawed at each other as they walked, some snarling or shrieking, others laughing and chittering like hyenas on the prowl. The old monk, by this point, looked bloodied and hurt. The hail and the chunks of the trees from the lightning had hit his body over and over. From dozens of deep wounds, the blood trickled down his robes. But his head wasn't bowed, and he emanated peace. "He's bloodied, but his head is unbowed," I said to myself, thinking. It seemed to have great relevance, but I couldn't understand why. As the demons approached, the lightning began to strike closer and closer to the monk. The ground shook with each blast, and I feared the mountain would fall apart under the strength of the crash. The first row of demons had seen the monk. The bloodlust and loathing had showed from their eyes, and it made me scared. When the wind blew, a smell filled the area, like burning sulfur mixed with the odors of decomposing bodies. I took a step back into the forest, trying to hide myself as best I could. But as they approached, the monk opened his eyes. Light seemed to stream from within him, great waves of it that came from those eyes. And for the first time in his life, he must have experienced the greatest bliss. His eyes widened, and eternity seemed to pour from deep within him. Those eyes never moved, but they seemed to see everything. A small smile forced across his lips. For a moment, I felt like I looked not upon an old man, but a blazing pillar of light. "I have attained peace," he said, pulling a knife out of his robe and putting it to his throat. "Despite my dying and my sickness, I have attained peace. I will not be returning, never, to this world." And with a look of bliss beyond anything I'd ever seen, he slit his own throat and died. At the moment he died, the black clouds and thunder and demons receded, and I found myself standing under a bright summer sky, alone with the corpse of a man who would never return. Well, folks, it looks like our stories are at an end again. I do hope you've enjoyed these tales from great writers that aren't yours truly, and I hope you'll come back again for more great stories and more great times here on Cozy Horror. Until then, this is Dr. Plague, wishing you a wonderful day and a spooky evening.